And I think once I made that switch and realized that it's not the separate thing, it's like you've got character, you've got place, you've got like all of these things, that it's an integral part of the story. And once I started thinking of it like an actual character of the story, it opened up a whole new world to me, quite literally. And
I love that.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Novelry on Writing. To celebrate our brand new prize, The Next Big Story, we've got 5 bonus episodes here to help you write a standout entry, delving into the 5 elements that make a story great. 1. Person. 2. Problem. 3. Place. 4. Plot. And 5. Prose. Now, we're going to dig into these in the next episodes, and you can watch them whether it's on your lunch break, whether you're out at work, whether you're cooking in the evening, wherever you can find the time. Because story ideas can come to you anytime and any place. For the next big story, we're offering a grand prize of $100,000 for just 3 pages of writing. Yes, just 3 pages of the beginning of a novel, that's all. So, what should those pages include? Let's find out in this very special podcast episode. This is the Novelry on Writing.
Hi, I'm Sorcha Rose. I'm an editor here at the Novelry and I work on crime and thriller. And today we're joined by Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina Sorell, and I'm a writing coach here at the Novelry. I'm also the author of Mothers and Other Strangers and The Wise Women. At the Novelry, I coach in women and contemporary fiction, as well as romance and book club fiction and uplit.
I'm very excited to talk about our topic today, which is place. So for me, I think the definition of place is like setting, the time that the book's set, the destination of where the story is happening.
Yeah, definitely it's the world in which your story takes place, right? When I was starting to work on putting place in my stories, I was finding it really challenging to think of it as something that I needed to integrate into my story. And I think once I made that switch and realized that it's not the separate thing, it's like you've got character, you've got place, you've got like all of these things, that it's an integral part of the story. And once I started thinking of it like an actual character of the story, it opened up a whole new world to me, quite literally. And
I love that.
as an editor, like, what is something that you look for when you're looking at people's work to establish place? What says to you that this person has a real handle on the world that you're
Yeah.
exploring?
I think a lot of writers starting out, they just like, yeah, I'm going to put up front everything to do with the world. It's just going to be all like up there at the front. We're going to get it sorted, and then we can get into everything else. But I think as an editor, that's kind of, I'm like, oh no, the story is just as important. As you said, it's setting, it's place, everything we've got here. It needs to be working in tandem. So for me, as an editor, I'm looking for those subtle hints that are bringing atmosphere and they're bringing the mood, but it's not long sentences of descriptions. I don't need to know the paint color of every wall, of every room.
Every
And that,
molding, every sconce, every creaky floorboard.
I think it's like such a good thing when you're starting out writing to really get into the flow of your setting like that. And, you can explore the house, but then it's about taking it back a little bit and make sure it's not on the page. It doesn't need to be there. Writers, they're like, I have all this knowledge about my book and my world. I want to give it all. But you kind of got to get that nice balance of not having too much on the page.
Yeah, I think the balance is so important. If anything, I probably underwrite a little bit on place to start. I want to bring the audience in and let them definitely know where my characters are and where the world exists. But it's as important to me to show how that place affects the characters in
Mhm.
terms of how they react to it. Are they a city mouse in a big city and therefore the place is really overwhelming? Are they somebody who blends beautifully into their affluent Upper East Side lifestyle? It's a real way for me to also comment on the situation, of not to comment in terms of pointing to it, but really to establish like my character's relationship to the world that they're in. And I think that can be really helpful for the reader as well, as a way of integrating it that feels natural rather than sort of forced on top.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about how characters are interacting, that is so important. And some of the most iconic settings, if you think of Gilead and The Handmaid's Tale, how are the characters reacting to the world that has been created and sort of the rule book that, Margaret Atwood has thrown at them? This is a world where, women don't have the same rights. it creates really interesting plot and, and exciting characters who want to go against that, and then the stakes become higher. So yeah, can you think of any other books where
Well,
the setting is just
I was thinking of Harry Potter, right? I mean, we have him in these two different places where he's in this real world of the Muggles, and he's trapped under the stairs, and it's really confined, and it lets us know that he's basically has as much value in that family as the mice that keep him company. And I
Mm,
think that really sets the tone off the bat that there's this big, beautiful place, but where is he? He's under the stairs, right? He's locked in himself. He doesn't know this whole other world exists. And then once he gets to Hogwarts, it's like it, it's magical in many ways
and a great
because
contrast.
yeah, it's a great contrast. And I think also it's something which a lot of people have never experienced. Not a lot of us spend a lot of time in castles, especially not magical ones. And I think it does something for the reader, which I really love, and that's introducing them to a new world. Right. So
Mm.
there's something familiar. We all know what it's like to be awe inspired by a new setting that we haven't discovered, but it has that wonderful element of taking you away and allowing you to escape somewhere different, which I think place is really, really has the ability to be very powerful at doing.
Yeah, I think of, some romance novels and, books that get me in the mood for going on holiday when they have like a really lovely setting. I'm thinking Meet Me at the Lake and that sort of like, oh, romance, summer holidays. You just know like the atmosphere you're going to get when you read it.
There's more than just the actual details that describe the setting. There's the experiences and the sights and the sounds and the smells and the emotional connection that the characters make to their places and their settings that I think are really, really important.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about the sights and the sounds and the tasting. I think sometimes when we're talking about setting as an editor when I'm reading, lots of times it's focused on what we can see. When a writer takes me to a new city that I've never been to, but I feel like I'm there, that's really magical. And it's like, yeah, the food that they eat, I get so hungry. Like that's great like world building for me when I'm like, oh yes, I would love a nice baked bread or a cake or something. And I'm like, yeah, gotta go and get some food. And then sometimes they're not as nice smelling
Right.
things or things like that. I think in crime and thriller for sure, sometimes you're not smelling the nicest of things and it puts you on
Right.
edge.
Right. Absolutely. I was thinking of horror as well, which, I don't read a lot of because it's so, it plunges you to that world so quickly, so well. I'm like, I can't do this, especially if it's done so well. Those books I'm like, I will read during the day. But it's really powerful as a writer to read things that are outside your genre as well,
Mm.
right? Because yeah, see how a thriller does it, see how crime and suspense does it. It's so powerful to understand how different genres do and then to take those tips away from it, even if it's something different. So even if you're writing romance, how quickly were you plunged into that setting and that thriller? Can you do the same thing for your reader in a romance? You mentioned books, and I was thinking of being taken away places on vacation. I was thinking of Emma Straub's The Vacationers. What I love in that is every member of the family has a different reaction to the place.
Mhm.
And I think that's really true. If you've ever gone on vacation with a group of people, you don't all approach it the same way. And what I love about that is it gives you an opportunity to, again, explore character. And without saying, Sorcha feels this way about being in the sunshine, right? We can just see, you're in the sunshine, it's hot, you're sweating, or that could be me. I could be the hot and sweaty one. You could be just luxuriating by the pool, reading your magazine, but I think it creates such richness for the characters and for the story.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about how the characters are interacting and how plot becomes character, because I
Mhm.
think there's so many books where the setting that you give in your character is really restricting them. We kind of talked about this a little
Mhm.
bit. And I always think of those locked room thrillers where the setting is so integral to the fact that your characters can't leave a space. I
Right.
think Lucy Foley is an amazing author. She's done The Hunting Party that's set like up in the highlands of the forest, and these group of people get back together for a reunion, and there's no bad blood between them, and just having that setting of them not being able to leave is just so obsessive and creates amazing tension. And that's a real choice from the writer, from the get-go. And
Yes.
there's so much that you have to put in preparation of setting up that setting, and then also the setting changing with the characters in the book. When things are getting bad, there's more snow, they can't leave, and that's really exciting to read about and shows that your setting can't just be one thing. It can develop over time with your characters. It's as much as kind of like a little character arc as your character's going
Yeah,
through.
absolutely. And the environment around the setting, right? That can change as well. Like the time of day, the world events that are happening. Suddenly, this place that you're at, that felt like an idyllic retreat. I'm thinking of Rumaan Alam's Leave the World Behind. They've gone to this beautiful place. It's this Airbnb. It's outside of the city. It feels so luxurious. But as an event happens that nobody understands,
Mm.
and strange things start happening, and the signal gets lost, and they're unable to get cell phone, and they feel apart from the outside world, and they're in this beautiful Airbnb no longer feels like a retreat, right? It feels like they're trapped.
And we've spoken about, setting being a character, but it can also be an antagonist. I really do think about the Hunger Games. And although Katniss is like trying to fight off the other tributes, the setting, they create this setting in the games literally to kill them and go after them. And, I was thinking about those like hornets that's like scientifically created to get them. And that fear that even the setting that she's trying to use, they're trying to get the water, they're trying to get, fire going, the natural world that they've created can turn against them. I think that's also a really exciting way to use setting.
I'm Jan Martel, the author of Life of Pi, The High Mountains of Portugal, and Self, and I'm delighted to be a judge for the next big story from the novel. My fellow judges and I are looking for fresh voices in fiction. No experience necessary. You could win $100,000 for just 3 pages of a story, and the opportunity to turn your story idea into a novel. So start writing and enter today. See the website for details, terms, and conditions.
So we've kind of focused on place and setting, but a really big part of that is the time that you set a book in. We kind of always think of like historical novels, like during World War II or something, but in contemporary novels, we also have that. So, as a writer yourself, has there been any decision making with time for your books that felt really important?
Absolutely. So in my first novel, Mothers and Other Strangers, it was really important to me to have the novel take place pre-internet. So this is a woman who's estranged from her mother, and she's trying to figure out who her mother was after her mother has passed away. She wants to know what secret she had, who she was really running from, what was the truth of her story. And I didn't want the character to open up a laptop and just start Googling in, who was my mother? Just put the name in, because all of that information, so much of it is available to us online now. I wanted her to have to really hunt for clues and find people and talk to people and, old letters and paper and journal. And then I wanted her to have to get on a plane. I wanted her journey to be long. I didn't want to be able to just pick up a Zoom call with somebody halfway around the world. That was really, really important to me. And I think that gives so much more to the reader, right? Because there's a journey. And too often we see people, if we're watching television or, they're based on books, we see people just pick up a phone, right? Or make a call or get a text. And I wanted to remove the immediacy of the ability to access the knowledge. And I really
Yeah.
wanted to create the quest. And the only way that was going to happen is if I put it pre-internet. And I think it was the right decision. I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't change
Yeah,
it.
I think so. I think as an editor, put my editor hat on and being like, yeah, big tick is when it has purpose. There's so many times that, I'm editing a book where someone, maybe for nostalgia reasons, for personal reasons, they'll be like, oh, I set it, in the early 2000s. And that's absolutely fine to do that. But why are you doing it? What is that bringing to the story? As you said, we're coming back to it all the time, the setting as a character. What is it that character bringing to your story? Often in crime and thriller, people will do it so that they don't have technology to find people. And that is fine to do, but it has to have a purpose. And it can't just be an easy, way out of finding the murderer very, very quickly. So it's got to have real purpose. And yeah, I think that's super important.
I'm curious from an editor's point of view, what you look for in really well-written historical fiction.
I think something that people worry about just before they start writing historical is that they're like, well, I haven't been there. I have to do lots and lots and lots of research. And I do think you have to do your research, that well, will be always someone that knows a little bit more than you and could point out, historical inaccuracies. But I think for me, in terms of historical, I want the flavor, I want the atmosphere, I want the mood from the time, that it's come from. If there's a war happening and there's a conflict, how is that kind of interacting with your characters? You can't have a book set during World War II and then nothing to do with World War II is impacting the people. People will see the date and they will know what was happening then. So I think just having an awareness, you don't have to read lots of history books. I think people will be glad to hear that. If there's a particular period that, you hear an interesting fact and you want to bring that into a story, of course do that. do some research, but also don't include all of that research on the page, because that doesn't feel like storytelling. That's just, info dumping. You want to avoid the info dumping.
Oh,
Um,
I think that's such a good phrase for it. Yes.
yeah, I think people just want to have, they know all this stuff. They want to get on the page, and that is fine, but it has to have purpose. And I think that is always something as an editor, when I say people who've been edited by me will be like, yeah, she's going on about it again. Purpose. Purpose is everything. If you're ever questioning why you're including something, if it has a historical accuracy, if it's going to add something to, the plot in terms of upping the stakes for your character because, the planes are going to go over and they're going to bomb that night. Where do the characters need to be? Where can they hide? That's great. If you're struggling with purpose, I think that's always something to come back to make sure, it's working as it should.
That's really wise. Would you say there are some no-nos when it comes to setting?
I think at the Novelry, we say tools, not rules. So I'll
Yes.
take that. But, with no nos, I think it is just the info dumping. It is just putting so much in there, or a setting where I feel that you're not connected to it because you've just researched it and you don't love it. You don't have to have gone everywhere, but I
Right.
need you to know that there's some sort of flavor in it. As a writer for you, is there any no nos, do you think?
You don't need a bazillion adjectives to describe something. I like less is more. And I feel that often if we really know something and we really love it, we're able to accurately convey that information. So yes, get all the research, get all the information that you need. And then if you put it all on the page on info dump, that's fine. But then like peel back, peel back, peel back, really try to just like get to the heart of what it is that you're trying to describe and trying to say, because that can have us just as much impact as a bazillion adjectives, actually more,
Yeah.
much more impact, right?
We don't want that. We can pull back on that for sure. I know we kind of talked about a lot of the world that we already know, but obviously some people are going to be creating worlds that are new and fresh. But
Oh,
what do
yes.
you think is important about, world building? So for me, I love hearing about another world, but I also like to see some sort of mirroring to our own worlds where I can feel grounded in it. It doesn't feel like there's so much that I don't understand. We've still got to get around, whether it's cars, flying cars, flying skateboards, whatever. But I kind of need to know like what the rule book is.
For me, I need that portal, right? I need that anchor. I need to be that person who is led into that world and has a way to navigate it. So yes, even if it is completely foreign to me and it's something a wild invention, I'm riding on a flying dragon. That's great. It's still an animal. I still need to understand how to get on it and to ride. I still have reactions to like holding
Yeah.
on to what that means. There needs to be enough things that are realistic to who we are as people now as readers that make it accessible.
Yeah. And you don't never want to alienate your reader. We don't want to be over explaining things, but we also want to be introducing new original ideas. That is exciting. And it's kind of finding that point in the middle where it's something that feels familiar, but you're turning it on its head and giving this original quality that, goes with the story. Talking about riding a dragon, in June in those books, they're riding on sandworms. I find it so intriguing the fact that they're getting on a worm and how integral that is to the story. And how some people are better than others because they can do that and the hierarchies that it creates. I also love the Lord of the Rings for world building is a really great example because that is a story about people traveling in a quest. There's many different mini worlds inside this bigger world that Tolkien has kind of created. And in that, more characters. And I think that's also really exciting when you're going to different settings and you're bringing forward all these new rules that are coming from all these different settings included. That's really exciting to read about. And people shouldn't shy away from it, but also finding the balance between dialogue, plot, character, and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with those worlds like Dune and like Lord of the Rings. I think it's also, as a reader, I want to know that the author knows exactly where we are and has it all thought out. I'm happy if I feel like I could ask them any question and they would have the answer. I don't need every answer
Yes,
on the page, right? I don't need everything that got them there. It's a snapshot, time and place. There I am. I have the time, the place, the relationship of the character to the space, how they feel about it, how it's affecting them, how it supports the story.
exactly.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that big word purpose. I think it just comes back to that. So that's been a great chat that we've had, Gina. Before we go, Gina has some homework for you.
This is an exercise that I like to do, and it is from your own experience. I think it's a great way to start. Think about a place that you immediately felt like home. It could be somewhere you know really well, or it could be a new place. And for some reason, when you entered this world, everything about it felt right. You were there, you belonged. And now take a moment to write about what it was about that place that made you feel that way. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? How did you interact with the environment? What was it that made it feel like a great fit? And then do the exact opposite. Think of somewhere that you went that you just felt completely wrong. You were just a fish out of water. Nothing felt right. Everything you said was wrong. It just was, everything about it was completely in opposition to who you are. And then spend some time examining why you felt that way. And what was it about the space? What was it about you and your relationship to it that made you feel that way? And I think that can give you a lot of insight into your characters and how they react to their space.
That's great. I think that's brilliant homework. So yes, thanks again, Gina, and good luck to everyone who is entering the Next Big Story prize.
Yes, good luck. We're rooting for you.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so pleased to have you along for the writing journey, and we hope to see you on another episode of the Novelry on Writing. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at thenovelry.com. From first draft to finished manuscript, at the Novelry you'll enjoy one-to-one coaching from best-selling authors, live writing classes with award-winning authors and literary agents, and you'll work with a publishing editor all the way from submission to literary agents toward a publishing deal. All writers learn from other writers, even the greats. Write your novel in good company. Join us at the Novelry. We'll show you how to start, coax your story into shape, cheer you on to type the end.